Tiny in All That Air, the Philip Larkin Society podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first full episode of Tiny in All That Air. My name is Lyn Lockwood and I'm a trustee of the Philip Larkin Society. And the aim of this podcast is really to find as many different voices as I can to tell the story of Philip Larkin. Our first guest is Professor Edwin Dawes, who led biochemistry research at the University of Hull from 1963 to 1992. The Philip Larkin Society was originally set up by staff at the university in 1995, 10 years after the death of Philip Larkin, and they invited Eddie to become the chair because of his long-standing personal and professional relationship with Philip Larkin. Eddie starts us off by talking about his arrival at Hull in 1963.
I was appointed to the foundation chair of biochemistry at Hull in 1962, but for commitments in Glasgow, I couldn't take up the post until the 1st of July, 63. And in that period as well, we were busy setting up a new department with equipment and everything else.
Yeah.
And I got a letter from Philip. This was the first communication, saying that he knew that I was coming to Hull occasionally to see how things were going, and would I call in on him and arrange an appointment so he could discuss my library needs. Being a new subject coming in, and there was a system that at that time that £2,000 were available to stock up on books for the subject that weren't already represented. So that was that first meeting, and I discovered then that he wasn't greatly in favour of departmental libraries.
Oh, okay.
It was reasonably, because it was a small, compact campus at that time. But I pointed out that scientists do need, we call them the recipe books, close at hand. So they agreed with that quite reasonably. Okay. So we got a small departmental library which served our needs excellently. So that was the first meeting. I arrived in Hull, as I said then, on 1st of July 1963, and in February, following February, The Whitsun Weddings was published. So I bought a copy and I sent it across to the library with a note saying, "Dear Dr. Larkin, would you be kind enough to inscribe this for me?" Now, before I sent it across, I did what I do with most of my books, put my book plate in. And I should explain that this depicts a 17th century alchemist with a bit long beard and hat, and on his bench is a copy of Baptista Porter's Natural Magic, 1678. So Philip duly did it, although I discovered later he wasn't always keen to do these inscriptions. And he added at the bottom quite a nice likeness.
A nice likeness, yeah. So Larkin was becoming well known and well established as a writer at that point.
Yes. Mm.
And I think the university must have been surprised that he stayed and didn't leave to become a professional writer.
Yes, well, I think although he referred to it as the toad work, I think he really enjoyed it. And, and of course, his other well-publicised reason was that it kept people away from by living at the end of the railway line. Out in Hull. So you think there was a sense of... not bothered to come to Hull, it was too difficult to get
to. Because Kingsley Amis never came to visit him in Hull. And
that's surprising, isn't it?
And friends didn't come. So do you think he found a kind of sense of safety in Hull, that he could be quite private in Hull in a way that he couldn't be perhaps in London or somewhere?
I think, I'm almost certain that is the case, yes.
And then he grew to love the city anyway, didn't he?
Yes.
And he had a real professional, such a huge involvement with the development of the university. That must have been very satisfying
Yes, he was very fortunate that the Vice Chancellor at that time, Bryn Mawr-Jones, he's subsequently knighted, Sir Bryn Mawr, he was a professor of chemistry first, and then he became Vice Chancellor. And he was determined to build up, once the library, build up the library, yes, but once the university had become a university, it was the University College prior to 1954. And with that, to build up to a full university. Content. And so a lot of money was ploughed into the building, the first new library. And then there was the extension to that followed afterwards. So he was fortunate in that respect. He had a Vice Chancellor solidly behind him and ensuring the funds were directed to that purpose.
And it's still like a world-leading library now. I mean, it's in a beautiful campus now, isn't it?
It is,
I think it surprises people when they come to Hull to see what an amazing university and Larkin and people like yourself have built that in the last kind of 40 years to this amazing place,
So it was quite appropriate that Philip put forward the suggestion, which was readily accepted, that it be called the Bryn Mawr-Jones Library in due course. When Sir Roy Martin, who was the Vice-Chancellor of the university, when he retired, the University Council decided to give £5,000 for the creation of a law library. He was a distinguished lawyer. And at the Library Committee meeting, when this was announced, Philip commented, he said, I find it something marsupial putting the library of one Vice-Chancellor inside that of another.
That's a great image. I love that. That's a great line. So, what was he like to work with? Was he approachable? I mean, I know you two had a very good professional relationship and friendship. How did you find him sort of day to day? Was he kind of difficult to approach sometimes, or was he friendly? Or?
Well, for outsiders, perhaps a little. That's what I say. I think I got a very good entree with that. I'd only been here a year or two when I was voted to be the science representative on the library committee. So that's when I first came into contact with him professionally, as it were, in this way. And then I became Dean of the Faculty of Science for 2 years, and that made a continuation of it.
And so how did your friendship with Larkin develop then?
We used to chat about various things, and I became Dean of Science. That put me ex officio onto the Library Committee. So this took us into to 1970. And then in 1974, the then chairman of the Library Committee resigned from that. And Philip then approached me and said, will you allow me to nominate you to become the chairman of the Library Committee? So I said, okay, yes, we'll do that. And so that was the proposal which was accepted by the Senate and so forth. And then our relationship became much closer. Because this involved regular meetings. The Library Committee itself met 5 times per annum, Monday afternoons at 2 p.m. And the rigmarole was that at 10 a.m. on the Monday morning, we would meet in Philip's office, he along with his deputy librarian, and we'd discuss the agenda, identify any thorny ones that we might anticipate and how we would deal with it and so on. And then in the afternoon, the committee itself.
So you started to see that kind of
I started to see him on a regular basis, and that extended inviting him out here and so forth. And it was wonderful, the wittiest man I think I've ever come across.
Really?
Yeah, he could So anyway, this led to the classic tale of Larkin out for dinner with us. After this particular meal, he said to Amy, he said, "That's the most delicious chicken I've ever had." And she said to him, "Well, as a matter of fact, it was roast pheasant." And after that, he always assumed to be a connoisseur of chicken.
And did you ever go to, at that point, was he at Newland Park then?
He was at Newland, initially, he was still in
Pearson Park, right.
Yes.
And did you ever go to visit him there?
On very few occasions,
right.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I briefly met Monica there, and then I only met her on another occasion after that, and that was when Philip was in hospital on his terminal trip, and she needed ferrying to the hospital.
Right, okay.
So I was one of the people who did that. There were several of us helped that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And was she not particularly friendly or sociable? Did you find?
Well, I saw insufficient of her, I would say, but one might assume not too friendly. Yes.
Yeah. Just coming back to the Philip Larkin Society then, I know you've been like a guiding light in the society and the chairman, our only chairman, and still continue to be our chair. What were you hoping for at the beginning, the society? What kind of things? I know that you had your charitable aim, but what shape was that taking in the early days?
Well, to fulfil our mission statement there, besides launching the lectures, from the very early times, we set our eyes on the main target, which I regard to be our major success, and that was the memorialisation of Philip in Westminster Abbey. And it was a long haul.
That's a long haul,
I first wrote to the then Dean, Dr. Wesley Carr, in 1999. And he responded that I hadn't realised until this that the Dean sets his own, each Dean sets his own parameters for acknowledging.
Really?
Yes.
For choosing who goes into Poets' Corner. It's the Dean at that time. Oh, okay.
And one of his criteria was that the person should be dead for 20 years.
Right, and that was his criteria.
So that chopped that.
Okay.
But deans don't last forever.
No.
And so that was still our target. We must get that done. And subsequently then, when John Hall had become the Dean, knowing that his connections with Hull as well, having taught at the school out Mallet Lambert for a few years, I wrote to him and explained that previous Dean had said he'd wait 20 years.
Yeah.
And, although he couldn't wait that long. So the proposal was put to him again, and he didn't respond immediately.
Mm.
When he did, he apologised for not doing so, but said that he'd been too busy memorialising Ted Hughes.
of all people.
But he couldn't at the present time do that. But on the bottom of the letter, he added, "Come back to me."
Oh, okay. So it wasn't a no at that point. So you knew the door was starting to open.
The door was open.
Yeah.
So then the subsequent events after Larkin 25, of course, the success of that.
Yeah.
And then Hull's City of Culture.
Yeah.
These things were moving along.
Yeah.
And so he came back in 2015 with the indication that yes, it would be done, but it would have to be next year, that is. So it couldn't coincide with the City of Culture the year after.
Because I've wondered if the fact that he'd been offered the laureateship would have meant did it, or turning down the laureateship, do you think that counted against him at some point?
Well, the problems, of course, as you well know, began with Andrew Motion's biography and Anthony Thwaites' collected letters. No, selected letters. And his reputation went down like that. And even at the memorial service for him, which was held in Westminster Abbey in February of 86, there were letters by clergymen, certainly in the Times. Why should an atheist be buried in Westminster Abbey? This backlash there. So we're well aware of that, and I can't help but feel that element came into it as well. So it was a delight to discover John Hall's actual statement when he came to Hull to announce this formally, that the measured terms in which he put it, you mustn't judge people by, and that these such items wouldn't necessarily prevent anyone going into Poets' Corner. Because
all poets are people, aren't they? And they have good sides and not so good sides. And it's taken a long time since the publication of the letters and Motion's biography to have a more nuanced view of Larkin by the public, I think. I think James Booth's biography really helped.
Very much so. James did a great job with that. And so the pendulum swung back. And he was, of course, voted, wasn't he, as the most popular poet of the second half of the 20th century.
Absolutely. And he's all around us. I mean, I know we notice because our ears prick up when we hear Larkin, but I think it might have been James Booth challenged me to remember a line of poetry from Ted Hughes. And I do like Ted Hughes's poetry, but he's right. It doesn't get quoted. It hasn't gone into the national kind of psyche in the way that Larkin has.
That's right. There's hardly a week passes that you see a Larkin quote. Or he's mentioned in connection with.
Yeah, he seems very much with us still, very much with us today. And he hasn't disappeared from the educational curriculum. He's still in there. And particularly at A-level, and I know there's a lot of research going on at university. So I think he's definitely got a voice for today, hasn't he?
Yes.
Very, very clear.
Yes, it's almost become an industry.
Larkin industry. It has.
Which is great.
And of course, with Larkin 100 coming up.
Well, that's the next big anniversary.
Next big anniversary. So you said you thought the plaque in Poets' Corner then is your greatest achievement. What can you remember that afternoon when we went down? What were your strongest memories of that day?
Well, if I'm not facetious, I would say it was how cold it was.
Yeah. It was.
It was a moving experience.
Yeah.
Having, after all those years, finally achieved what we wanted. The other great achievements, of course, we mustn't forget James, initially with Jean Hartley and James, started off our About Larkin. And I believe, with my limited knowledge, admittedly, as a scientist, I think without doubt that is the finest literary magazine in Britain. But you may know more about that than I do. But
no, I think it's a brilliant magazine. Absolutely.
So James has carried on that tradition right from the start.
Yeah.
And that's helped tremendously to support our cause.
Yeah. Because I know at the moment James and Kyra are trying to pick the best articles, and I think he's got hundreds of pages already, and that's like trying to choose the absolute.
Yes.
It's astonishing what he's achieved with that. Absolutely, yeah.
And of course, the 25th anniversary and Larkin 25.
Yeah.
the Toads there that went nationwide and internationally, and I think that brought worldwide recognition of what was happening. And the success of the appeal, which Carol was greatly involved with, for the Larkin statue. So we must regard that as another great achievement of the Society.
Yeah, the statue at the whole station.
The competition, which was very interesting. And then we have him on the Paragon Station to greet everyone, although he's already heading for his train.
And the committee, the Larkin Committee, has only been fairly small, and the membership maybe up to about 400 or 500 people, but what it's actually achieved as a society has been astonishing, actually. And when you look at other literary societies that might feel much bigger, but I think what the Larkin Society has managed to achieve, just from these ideas that have got discussed in a room in Hull, and then they've had this global reach.
You see the way in which Jean Hartley's trip round Hull, the trail, the Larkin Trail. It's taken off tremendously. And there's a splendid idea.
It's amazing. And people, when they come to Hull, it's what they do think about Larkin and look for the statue and look for the toads and look for the trail. And again, I can't think of another writer. I know there's a lot of industry around Shakespeare, but I can't really think of another writer that really kind of has that sense of place and cultural reach, and especially a writer that's a bit controversial as well, but maybe that's why people are interested in him.
Yes.
Because he's got those different sides to him. Yeah, so, looking back, did you expect to be doing this for so long? Did you expect the society to develop, or was it just a kind of hope?
Like any new society being launched, then there is always the, shall I say, expectancy of how we'll do. And, I thought from the outset that we should do very well, and I think that's proved to be the case. But there's one facet here that I should have mentioned, I think, a little earlier when you were asking about the start of the society. It was not universally accepted, as I discovered, because the former Vice Chancellor I mentioned, Sir Roy Marshall, was involved with the formation of a Friends of the Bryn Mawr Jones Library. Many universities' libraries have the Friends to support them and have active programmes. And Sir Roy came to see me and said he was a little concerned about the Larkin Society. It was going to be working possibly at odds with the Friends.
Right, okay.
So I assured him that as far as I was concerned, I would do my best to make sure there was no clash with these things. But,
and you've done quite well not to get into any scraps with the Friends. So I know I asked you to choose your favourite Larkin poem, and I know you'd selected Here. I got this copy the same as you. I got this when I was about 15. It was my first, my first collection of Larkin.
Mine was I got at the launch of the book.
Oh, really?
Anthony Thwaite came for that, and that's inscribed on the actual day when it was launched.
Oh, lovely.
Which was done in the library.
Oh, so that was 1988. Right, so I would have been, about 18, 19 when I got it. I think I got it just before I went to university. So I never studied Larkin at school. My English teacher didn't do any modern poetry at all. He wasn't interested in much. We did a little bit of D.H. Lawrence, which Larkin would have appreciated, but we didn't do any Larkin. So I just kind of found him for myself, really. There's a lot to like about Larkin for a teenager.
I chose this for personal reasons. I found this a most evocative poem because it identifies so wonderfully a city that, in fact, it takes me back to my school days. I came from Goole, 20-odd miles away.
Yeah.
And I had a cousin who lived in Hull, considerably older than me and a married man, who was a watchmaker. And from time to time, we'd come and visit. And when I read this poem, had I been in Timbuktu, I could have identified this as Hull.
Really?
Just like that, yes.
Yeah.
So these wonderful description, the domes and the statues, the spires, the cranes, and of course the ships up streets.
Ships up streets,
because at that time the trawling industry was at its peak.
Yeah.
And Philip wrote this, I think, well, obviously after he came to Hull in the early 60s. And although the Cod Wars hadn't quite happened then, there were still trawlers there. But after that, the whole thing declined.
Yeah, because Hull was very different then before the bridge, and the docks were much nearer to where it's shops and things like that now, isn't it? So it looked a very different place.
And one of the delights of coming was to go on the ferry. From the ferry to New Holland in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
So the Slave Museum as well. I can remember as a kid going there and seeing all these chains and restraints and the story. And they going round. I must have been about 7 then, I think. Going round, we came to a door that was obviously leading to another room, which had glass panes on it, and I peered in that and I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was this wonderful wax model of the man himself there in his armchair, Wilberforce. Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
William Wilberforce.
And you thought it looked so real.
They're surprising, I never realised that. Which of course made a big impression.
Yeah.
But Whitefriars as well, there he's got the Marks and Spencers and so forth, and cheap suits. Whitefriars, when I came to Hull in 1963, was still quite bustling.
Yeah.
And he doesn't pick on this here, but one of the features about Hull was olfactory.
Yeah.
I think he had a fishy.
Fishy
We've
smelling.
got it here. Yes, he's got fish smelling. There we are. Fishy smelling. Terminate fishy smelling. The Pastel of Ships up streets. The Slave Museum.
Yeah.
2 shops. My abiding memory of the Whitefriars then in the 60s was the Cardoma Cafe.
Yeah.
With its coffee, the aroma of coffee was associated with the Whitefriars.
Really?
It was very strong.
Yeah.
What was not so pleasant at that time was the fish meal factory.
Oh, yeah.
And I can remember it was the 1st of July 1963, and it was a lovely sunny day when we arrived here, and with all our furniture. And we sat outside to have a bite to eat, and sniffed.
Oh.
Then we said, I think somebody must be boiling up fish for a cat. And then we discovered, in fact, it was the fish meal factory, which, depending upon the direction of the wind, you could get this pond.
Yeah. The estate agents didn't tell you about that.
That's a thing of the past now, it's gone.
Yeah. And this is something that people kind of love or hate about Larkin, because some people love the domestic side of it and the interest in toasters and things like that.
Yes.
But other people say it's not fitting for poetry, especially in the 60s, where people still had that kind of traditional idea of what poetry should be about.
No, I thought it's a very very accurate description.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. And it's that photographic aspect of, he had that eye, didn't he? He just noticed things.
And the other aspects of it, I did a lot of cycling then. And of course, the East Riding was these parts of it, nice and flat for cycling, so you could travel quite a bit. So often on an evening we'd cycle over Booth Ferry Bridge and into the East Riding, or Saltmarsh and Broomfleet, all these halts that he mentions there. One intriguing thing in that first stanza is that he uses swerving twice within 5 lines, which rather intrigued me, But it conveys what?
What do you think to you, what does it convey?
Swerving to solitude, that's a destination, skies and scarecrows.
Because Larkin very rarely repeats words, doesn't he? Even across his poems.
Yes.
If he used a word once, he'd try not ever to use it again, a significant word anyway.
Yeah.
And you're right, is to use swerving so many times. It was clearly like the word he needed, that moving away from anywhere else.
So the solitude, of course, that he's quite happy with that. So I like the way as well then we go beyond Hull and towards the coast. And you remember, as I say, cycling and getting out to Spurn Point areas and so forth, where the land ends and you're out into the North Sea. Here silence stands like heat, luminously peopled air ascends, and past the poppy's bluish neutral distance ends the land suddenly beyond the beach.
So it's very evocative, isn't it? And it's still quite undeveloped, that area. Can you still cycle out to the Holts, and is the countryside still quite similar?
No.
Yeah, if you if one cycled out there, would it look quite similar
to what it was? Yes, it's an unchanging. I mean, apart from things like Sunk Island, which was reclaimed from the Humber and now looks as though the Humber's going to reclaim it again deliberately to prevent the floods. But it is a strange landscape with tremendous skies. There was an enormous skyscraper there. So that's why I like that one. There are others I like as well. The trees is one, because here until about 10 years ago had a beautiful copper beech tree at the front there.
Oh, okay.
It was a beautiful tree.
Yeah.
It died and it had to be chopped down.
Yeah. And the line in the trees was one of the choices for the plaque, wasn't it? A fresh.
Yes.
A fresh.
Yeah.
We'd consider that for Westminster Abbey. So would you like to say a little bit about the Society's relationship with the artist Grayson Perry, which is something that's created a lot of interest over the last few years?
Yes, well, in 2017, to link up with the City of Culture, we were very fortunate indeed that our events secretary, Carol Collinson, managed to persuade Grayson Perry to come. And this was a tremendous success in the Middleton Hall. It was a complete sellout, and everyone agreed it was one of the finest evenings they'd spent.
That was amazing. Yeah. And Grayson Perry's support has been fantastic, hasn't it, in the last couple of years? Yeah. And I mean, I was aware of him as an artist, but I didn't know about his love for Philip Larkin and Larkin's poetry. But there's references throughout his work, isn't there?
Yeah.
And he came to Westminster Abbey as well. We were standing outside Westminster Abbey waiting to go in, and I saw him come along with his wife, and of course they're both very distinctive. And I just shouted, "Mr. Perry!" And Rachel's going, "Stop it, stop it!" Yeah. But he came over, and he was so friendly. Yeah, and so hopefully we'll get Grayson Perry back. Maybe get him on the podcast at some point. I have to get Carol to give him a ring. Yeah, he's got lots of really interesting things to say about Larkin. And it's really interesting to see what Grayson Perry says about sort of gender and like our lifestyles and how we live and the clothes that we wear and the kind of buildings that we live in. And they're all the kind of things that Larkin was really interested in as well. Yeah. So on the face of it, they look really unlikely kind of pairing, but actually got a great deal kind of in common in lots of interesting ways. You know, you can understand them from different points of view. Thank you so much to Eddie for being my first guest in this opening episode, and I'd also like to say thank you as well to Eddie's son Adrian for all his help. This podcast is produced by Simon Galloway and the music is provided by The Mechanicals. Please follow us on Twitter at tiny_air, and why not have a look at the Society website at philiplarkin.com. There's lots more information there about podcast episodes. You could buy some Philip Larkin merchandise and even become a Society member. Please tweet us your thoughts, and if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love you to get in touch.
The horns of the morning are blowing, are shining. The meadow is wet with the coldest of June.